Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be having a go at making a Sisu face cake. So this is the second version of my Sisu cake. So the first one I tried to make in the style of one of the unicorn buttercream cakes, so it's way more basic than this one. I'm going to put a link in the corner of the screen should you want to check out that one as well. And then this one's going to be a slightly fancier version, or more lifelike version. So I've printed off an image that I just found on the internet of Sisu the dragon. And I'm going to have it so it's about a 10-inch cake, I think. But make sure your backing cake board or cake drum is bigger than your cake so that it all fits on there nice and easily. I'm just cutting out around my template roughly. And I'm going to place my cake on the board. So I've got a 10-inch cake here, guys. It is partially frozen, so I had kept this one in the freezer so it would be a little bit firmer for me to cut into. And I'm just going to put layers of buttercream in between. So I've got chocolate cake, and then the pink cake is actually just a vanilla cake. I actually had a go for the pink one. It was a Mr. Kipling packet mix one. And it's called a magic cake mix or something. And it turned pink. And I bought it just because I thought it looked fancy. So that's going in the middle of my layers of chocolate cake. So I'm placing my template that I've cut out earlier on top of the cake. And I'm just going to roughly cut around that template. Don't worry about cutting out the horn though. That could be missing at the moment. Use your offcuts to kind of fill in the bottom of the neck where our cake doesn't quite reach to. And then I'm going to add the jawline. So just mark where the jawline goes. You can cut your template to help you with that. And then we're taking out a bit of cake from sort of around the outer edge of the jawline. Keep those offcuts because we can keep adding them to the cake. So I've added a tiny little bit of an offcut to the end of the nose just to give me a bit more length on the nose and also to make it stick up a little bit as well. I'm just removing sort of the far side eye as well so that I can cut out a bit of a dip there in the cake. I'm going to work out roughly where the eye goes. And then let's cut a little bit of cake out. I don't want to go too deep, but I do want a bit of shape so that the cheek looks like it's sticking out more than the eye socket does. I think at the edge of the smile, it looks like it maybe sticks out a little bit as well. So I'm just adding a tiny bit of cake on there. I think I'm going to cut a little bit out just above the eyebrow area so that it brings the eyebrow out more. And then I'm just going to cut out the odd little patch in sort of the hair part so that when we put the hair on, it's not completely flat. And I've added a tiny bit more cake there just to the eyebrow. So I'm going to cover the whole thing in buttercream. So you can give it a crumb coat, which is just a thin layer first, and then you can refrigerate it and put it in the fridge, which is what refrigerating is, isn't it? And then you can give it a second coat. I am way too lazy for that, so I just give it my quick crumb coat. Because it's going to have a hair effect, I'm not too worried about it being smooth on this one, guys. And I'm going to use some blue paste. Now, you get loads of different brands. Go for whichever blue you think is the closest blue colour to Sisu. But we're also going to paint her a little bit anyway. So I've actually mixed two different ones together. I've got a little bit of Renshaws and a little bit of the sugar paste one. Just because I thought they'd make a nice blue combined together. Now, there's just a little bit that I want to add the fondant to before I put a full layer of fondant over the cake. And that's just the nose area. I want to make sure this is the right shape. And I haven't cut the cake to exactly the right shape, so I'm just putting a piece on there, which will be under the nostrils. And then the rest of it I'm going to roll out. So I think I've got about 750 grams worth of fondant here. I want to go fairly thin, but not so thin that I cut through it when I'm putting in the hairlines. So I would say this is maybe 2 to 3 mils thick is the fondant that I'm adding on here. And I'm going to press it down now. It's only just big enough, but instead of cutting bits off around that far edge, what I've done is I've pinched them so that they'll become like the hair. I think I'm going to have to take a little bit off just under the mouth and around that side of the neck there. But the far side, I'm leaving all those extra bits on to look like hair. Could be a seahorse at this point, couldn't it? So just make sure you've rubbed it in gently in the eye area. And then we can start adding some hairlines. So go around the jaw first with shorter hairlines. And I'm just using my Dresden tool. Check that your paste isn't firming up too much when you're doing this as well. So you don't want to work too slow because it's going to be harder to put the indentations in. So I've put a line in for the mouth. I switched and used the other end of my Dresden tool for the nostrils. This fondant is pretty pliable, so I can move it around quite a bit. So I'm shaping the eyebrow a little bit more, just smoothing off that eye socket. I think my eyebrow's possibly a little bit high up on the face compared to the template. We'll see what it looks like as we go along. And then we're going to add hairlines with the Dresden tool. I can press pretty firmly into this paste. Again, it depends what kind of fondant or sugar paste. So sorry guys, when I say fondant, it's the same thing as sugar paste or ready to roll icing. But keep the hairlines long on the back of the head and the neck. And then as we come onto the face, go for much shorter lines. You guys have probably seen me doing this a lot on some of the face cakes that I've done, especially the cat cakes that I did quite recently. In fact, I'll put a link up to those cat face cakes as well, because then you can see me putting the hairlines onto those as well. It is a little bit time consuming, but I think it's worth it. I think it looks nice. And I haven't spent longer than like, I don't know, maybe half an hour doing the hairlines. So I'm just going to fill the eye socket with white. I did use the template to draw a rough line for that as well, guys. And I'm just going to also clear a bit of space where the horn's going to go. So I've cut off my template, the horns, and then I'm going to just use modelling paste. So I'm using modelling paste instead of fondant, guys, for the horn, just so it's a bit firmer. I've kept it fairly thin because I don't want it to be too heavy. So I'm cutting out the shape. And we're just going to slot that in. So where I kind of cut the fondant, it's just going to slot nicely into there. And I'm resting it just against anything that's a similar height. So this is just a powder pot, I think, that I've got resting under there, because the horn will firm up. So I'll move that pot later. So I've got some really pale, like violet coloured paste, but you can use blue, because we're going to paint over the top anyway. But violet, really pale purple is going to be nice. So I'm using a round plunger cutter. We're just going to cut out the iris, and then we've got some black, really thinly rolled out again. Smaller circle, I'm going to pop that in the middle. And look at your template for whereabouts the circles fit in the eyes, where the pupil goes compared to all the white of the eye. So it comes really far towards the middle, and a little bit in the far eye as well. I've actually got modelling paste again for the eyelashes, but you can use fondant, either's fine. And we're rolling it so it's thinner at one end, thicker at the other. And the thin end goes towards the inner corner of the eye, and the thick end goes towards the outside edge. You're going to cut off any extra that you don't need. And we'll do the same on the bottom set of eyelashes, but keeping it a little bit thinner on the bottom set. And just drag it out slightly with the pointy end of your Dresden tool, or you can use like a toothpick, just so it looks a little bit more like individual eyelashes. And I'll do that the best I can on the far eye as well. And just a little bit under the nose. Now you see this more on the image than you do on the sort of the template than you do on mine, because of the angle of the camera. It's kind of hidden as the black bit that I've just put in. So I'm using edible pens now to colour in around the iris. You can use normal food colouring and paint it on, but I found the pens a little bit easier. So I've got two different purples in the pens. You can even add a bit of black. And I'm just drawing around the very outer edge of the iris, making it a little bit darker, and then just sort of bringing the odd line in. You can blend it with water as well if you don't want the lines as obvious. And we'll put a tiny dot of white fondant just in each eye. So I'm just taking a bit of that colour out where I think I went maybe a little bit too dark. And it's just with a tiny bit of water on my brush that I'm removing that. Okay, so now for painting, I'm using a mix of different food colours. So powdered food colours. I'm using blues and black. And I'm mixing them with dipping solution. So you can use clear alcohol or even lemon essence. I'm going to be honest, I've not tried lemon essence. So you guys can tell me how you get on with lemon essence if you use it. It would be nice to hear what people think of the lemon essence. It evaporates, does the dipping solution in clear alcohol, so it's not really left on your cake. It just leaves behind the colour. But by having the colour very diluted, you can see it's running into those hairlines and just giving me a bit of shading. And it's an easy way to shade by having it just run into all those lines. And then I'm going to use my pen to just put a little bit of purple on the far ends of each of sort of the chunks of hair that are on the neck and back of the head. And then I'm using a slightly damp brush to run over that, to spread it out and blend it in a little bit with the fondant. And you can put as much or as little as you want on this. I mean, keep looking at your template to see how purple you want the hair to be at the ends. And this time I'm just using some luster that's got a bit of a shimmer. Guys, what I'll do is I'll put links below the video to all the colours that I did use, just for if you wanted to use the same ones, but you can use your own choice of like edible colours. Just make sure it's edible, guys. Just darkening the corner of the eye and just slightly above the eye, just so there's a tiny bit of shading on there. Don't go too dark on the white of the eye though. Now I've actually got some white powder, although it's going slightly blue when I'm putting it on. And any areas that you just want to look like they stick out a little bit more or to be a little bit lighter, you can then go over with the white. You can use it wet as a paint, or you can stick it on dry, whichever one you prefer for this highlight area, or for the highlights even. So I'm just going to go a bit more concentrated with the food colour. So I've got some blue and black mixed together, but slightly thicker, less runny than it was before. And I'm just painting the pattern on Sisu's horns. And then we just want a little bit of black painted on for the eyebrow. So not too heavy with this. And you can use this dry or wet as a paint. Just be careful if you're using it dry though, because the powder kind of goes everywhere. Let's just darken up that mouth a little bit. Now the background, I think I'm going to paint the background quite a bit. I'm starting with a green, but you don't have to start with green. To be honest, by the time I've finished it, it doesn't end up very green anyway. So you'll be able to see that it doesn't matter too much, the colour. Although if I'd started with it black, it would be harder to cover over. I've rolled it into a long strip and I'm just trying to carefully get it around the outer edge of my cake. And then I'm cutting any extra off from around the outside edges of the board. And let's change the colour up a little bit. So I've got a really dark purple. I realise on camera it looks more black, but it's a really deep purple. And I'm just mixing this with a little bit of dipping solution, just kind of dabbing it on the board. So I don't want a nice neat pattern. I want it to be dabbed so it looks a bit sort of, not speckledy. I can't think of the word for it today. It wants to look like a kind of blurry black background. We're not painting any particular things in the background. And you can use a mix of the colours and stuff that you used earlier. I've got some pearlised purples, the pearlised blue that I used earlier. Again, I'll link below in the description, below this video, the ones that I've used. Just darkening up a little bit on the horn. So a little bit of black, just to darken it. I've maybe gone a little bit too dark with the horn, I'm not sure. And of course, guys, if you don't want to add all the colour, you don't have to paint it, but it just really brings it to life a lot more with all this painting. And I realise not everyone likes painting. It's actually easier than you think. Even just the bit where we did the shading at the beginning with a really diluted black just makes such a big difference. And then just go over the board as many times as you want till you're happy with it. And then I'm just trying to decide whether we go for some decorating. I think some sprinkles. I'm just going to stick to one colour. I was going to use lots of blues, but I think we're just going to go for silver. I was going to use the rods, but I'm also going to keep it to just circles or spheres. Ball-shaped sprinkles. These ones I've got actually, a lot of them are chocolate in the middle. Excuse my phone in shot there. The really big ones, the big silver ones, are actually almost like a Malteser and then covered in like the silver candy coating. I don't know if you saw that there where I showed it up to the camera. And I think we're going to keep those sprinkles just to the lower part of the board rather than everywhere. I think that's nice. And this one, guys, is going to go to my next door neighbour because I know she's just watched this film and it's also her birthday. So I'm going to take that round for her birthday. So I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Let me know if you prefer this Sisu version or the last Sisu version that I did. And if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment below. You can see more of my tutorials by clicking on the images on screen now. If you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button to stay up to date with my future tutorials. There are also links in the description box below where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram and more.